They're still material. They're still fully actual, just like physical atoms are. But they're actual in a way that's more complex and richer. Right? So now we realize that matter itself comes in grades. There's physical matter and there's transphysical matter, both. And so in order to understand the world, we cannot try to explain everything just on the basis of physical matter. We can't do it. This is one of the major breakthroughs that we get here. It's a whole new understanding of materiality and of the role of the inorganic in actuality. So then the question is, what is the relationship between transphysical matter, between entities like us that are of higher grade, and physical matter, which is low grade? How are the causal interactions worked out between actual occasions of different grade? What I'm going to want to say, and I'll work on this more this afternoon, is that scientists have been trying to understand reality by analyzing the causal interactions among low-grade occasions. But if we accept the idea that there are various grades of matter, then we also have to look at the causal interactions among high-grade actualities and the causal interactions between high-grade occasions and lower-grade occasions. So what we're doing here is we're complexifying the network of causes which characterize actuality. We're giving ourselves a whole new set of conceptual tools with which to work with the interpretation of reality. So I want to go back a little bit now. I want to start talking about how causal interactions among different occasions work. And in particular, what I want to talk about now is how high-grade occasions like ourselves interact with lower-grade occasions like those that make up our bodies. In other words, how do we inhabit a body? Scientists are trying to say that I am my body. So they'll say, for example, that to be conscious is what it feels like to be a pattern of electrical activity in the brain. So they're trying to say that all actuality can be understood by understanding the causal interactions among low-grade actualities. I'm saying no. I am an actual occasion of higher grade. I am not physical matter. I am a different kind of matter. But if that's the case, if I am not part of the physical world, how do I control my body? How do I coordinate the activities of my body? So in order to understand that, we have to go back and remember that, let me think about this for a second here. Remember that I come into being out of a world, and the world presents to me a field of structured possibilities, things that I can do and can't do, things that are more probable and less probable. But then I make a choice about what I'm going to actualize, and that the choice that I make is always referent to my aim or my purpose in life, my purpose in this moment. Right? So aim is intrinsic, as I said, final cause is intrinsic to actuality. What is my aim? What is the general aim of all actuality? And what Whitehead says about this is that the general aim of actuality is the maximization of value in the present and in the relevant future. Now, what's value? Value is the richness of experience, the rasa, the sap, the essence, the wonder, the enjoyment, the bliss, right? That's what the value is. And we all know that we live for value in that sense, right? We want to maximize value. That's why we make our decisions. So there's this very general aim which is built into actuality, but also each one of us has specific aims. We aim at a certain type of value. And so, for example, each one of us has a personality that's been developing over many years, and that personality expresses itself in a taste for certain kinds of value. I value intellectual understanding, and I sacrifice other values to achieve that one. Other people value artistic or aesthetic value and sacrifice some others, right? So we each have our own individual aim that we develop over time. But also, we each have social aims. And what I mean by that is the things that we value are conditioned by our environment, by our families, by our friends, right? By our nation, right? We have a certain set of values which comes to us from the larger social environment in which we exist. And then there are also certain cosmic aims. So for example, why is there evolution? Right? Why is there, as Teilhard would say, a drive toward complexity and interiority? Why do things become more evolved? There's an aim somehow built into every actualization. There's this aim at greater value, right, which comes to us from the divine. And so the aims that influence our existence come from our past and from our society and from the cosmos and from the divine. Right? And it's in terms of our aims that we evaluate the possibilities that are available to us. Now, what I want to suggest is that we influence the aims of the actual occasions making up our bodies. So that we actually shift the taste for value of our cells and of our organ systems. So that when I decide to move my arm, somehow my cells start wanting those processes that will lead to the movement of my arm. Right? I persuade my cells to move because I influence their aim. So the occasions that are larger than I am, that organize society and organize Gaia and organize the universe, right? They affect the choices that I make. And I, in turn, affect the choices that my cells make by influencing their aim, their desire, what they want. So we can now see the whole universe as this hierarchy of actual occasions in which the larger ones persuade the activities of the smaller ones, or the lower grade ones, so that they begin to organize in new ways. Now, let me talk about this in terms of a single cell. What we know from science is that cells are vast collections of macromolecules, very complex molecules. And scientists have discovered that even in the laboratory, they can bring about dissipative systems of macromolecules, and that these dissipative systems will actually draw their own boundaries, and they can create little sacs around themselves and so forth. But that's not quite life. Scientists have not figured out how to create life. Now, when there is life, there are three things that cannot happen as a simple result of the organization of macromolecules. And the first one is, whenever there's life, whenever there's a cell, it has its own central consciousness. Right? Now, we'll talk later about how we can know that, but we do know that every cell has its own consciousness. People who are, do work with cells under microscopes, they say that if the cell was big enough, they'd make it a pet. It's just like a living being, right? It actually is just like a living being. So it's living, right? It has its own centralized consciousness. And a cell pursues possibilities that would not make any sense to a macromolecule. Right? So there's a cell in a Petri dish, and there's food over there, and there's not food over there, and the cell will sense the gradient and move toward the food. Macromolecules don't do that. They don't think that way, right? In other words, the cell has a deeper penetration into the halo of possibility that always surrounds every actual world. And then also the cell manifests qualities that a macromolecule can't manifest, right? It moves in different ways. It appears in different ways, right? So, and then also the cell coordinates the spontaneities of the macromolecules. Right? I'm convinced that if we examine the behavior of molecules in cells, we'll find out that they move in different ways than macromolecules do outside of the cells. Because the behavior of the macromolecule is not totally determined. This is what a quantum theory teaches us, is that there's always indetermination in every moment of actuality. The momentum and the position of the macromolecule is not determined by its past. There's this realm of freedom. And that the macromolecule, the consciousness of the cell influences the aim of the macromolecule so that it begins to behave differently than it would. And it's through the influence of the cell consciousness that the macromolecules become a self-organizing system. Right, so what I'm suggesting here is that the phenomena of self-organization, that the way in which scientists now explain life, a self-organizing system, that in itself can only be explained by the intervention of actual occasions of higher grade. Making sense to you? Right? So now we can explain self-organization, which nobody else can explain. We can now explain it for what it's worth in terms of higher grade actualities. And we can also explain evolutionary emergence. In other words, new properties and new modes of behavior emerge in the course of evolution as higher grade actualities emerge in evolution. So we're not stuck with the properties of the atoms or the molecules, and we don't have to derive everything else from those, because in fact we realize that every actuality surveys a range of possibilities and decides among them, and the higher the grade of the actuality, the larger the field of possibilities which it surveys, and the larger its behavioral repertoire will be.